What if the reason your horse isn't consistent isn't because they need more training, but because they've never been allowed to think for themselves? Most of us are taught to guide, correct, and control every step our horse takes. What if that's what's actually holding them back? What if that's what's actually holding you back? In this episode, we're talking about autonomy, what it really means, why it matters, whether you are whether you ride dressage or just trail ride on the weekends, and how giving your horse a little more responsibility might actually make them safer, more responsive, and easier to ride. Today, I'm joined by Elizabeth Reicks, founder of Hatha Equus and co-founder of Hatha Equus International. Elizabeth's background blends classical dressage, horsemanship, and horse psychology in a really unique way. She studied with an Olympic dressage judge, a renowned European horseman and author, and one of the leading voices in dressage-based horsemanship here in the US. So she brings a perspective that goes far beyond traditional training. What I love about Elizabeth's work is that she doesn't just talk about connection, she demonstrates what's possible when horses are truly given a voice in the training process. You may have seen her riding without a saddle or bridle, but what's really behind that isn't the lack of tack. It's the presence of clarity, communication, and trust. In this conversation, we're going to break down what autonomy actually is, why it's essential for every horse and every human, and how you can start building it within your own riding, whether you're in a full bridle or just out hacking on the trail, or no bridle at all. Welcome, friends and fellow horse fiends. I'm Anna Fox of Equus Enlightened, and this is the Thinking Horse and Rider, the podcast dedicated to training you to become the best possible partner for your horse. Here, we explore the science and soul of horsemanship. We dive into equine behavior, the psychology of partnership, and compassionate training methods that help you become a thinking rider who creates a thinking horse. Because when you understand how your horse's mind works and show up with empathy and presence, everything gets easier and a whole lot more fun. My goal is to keep riding easy and fun for everyone, while helping you deepen your connection, find more flow, and maybe even create your own unicorn along the way. Whether you're working on dressage movements or just trying to understand why your horse did that thing they did, we'll explore the research, the real talk, and the small shifts that make a big difference in and out of the saddle. So grab your boots, take a deep breath. What are you waiting for? Come ride with me. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey Anna, thanks for
Uh,
having me.
you are so welcome. I'm going to let you do your own introduction and tell
Ooh.
us a little bit more about Hatha Equus.
Sure. Well, recently you had on Georgia, who is my other half, as I like to say. I am the founder of Hatha Equus and the co-founder of Hatha Equus International. Georgia is the lead manager, I guess you would say, on Hatha Equus International. And my main responsibilities are to keep the home base program here in Longmont, Colorado at Wild Song Ranch running. So that's where, if you've seen any of our videos online, with the dramatic mountain backdrop, we're at Wild Song Ranch here in Longmont. I founded Hatha Equus in 2016. So it's been about 10 years that we've been on the map here in Longmont. And when I moved the business over to Wild Song, Georgia actually came with as a boarder. She talked about this a little bit on the podcast with her, but during her maternity leave, with her first child, just started getting into positive reinforcement and because she opted not to ride. I was just so impressed with her endeavoring and the knowledge that she gained in such a short time about positive reinforcement. I decided to invite her to come and spearhead a positive reinforcement program at Hatha Equus at Wildsong. After that, it kind of organically grew, the two of us just experimenting and playing with concepts and ideas. Expanding, I had always used positive reinforcement as a method of training, or just, a little tool in my horsemanship kit. But I didn't have really a formal methodology or program behind it. So her coming in, and really laying into the science, which is, if you remember her from last week, she's such a geek in the best way about science. And I tend to ride the scientific waves. I would never pretend to be a scientist myself, but I very, very much believe in proven and tried experimentation. That's what she and I did. The Equus then just kind of morphed and evolved into something that we're both very, very proud of, and I think honors the horse better than I ever could have imagined by myself. That's how Georgia and I sort of brought what it is today into being. Before she was on board, it was very much a like a naturalistic dressage type feel. Dressage is still a very big part of what I do. I think Georgia helped just crack this universe open into something that could positively impact all horses and all people who want to do whatever with horses, not just dressage queens. So that's the short of it, the condensed version.
When you were talking, you brought up two more things that I thought about, and we may have to just have another episode maybe with both of you because your whole way of doing things at Wild Song Ranch is so different than what we see so much on the
Yeah,
East Coast
yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
So tell me a little bit, just give me the rundown of how that looks with the paddock paradise and horses living together in a boarding
Mhm.
environment and it working.
Yeah, love. So, well, I'll give you the situation that my horses were in before we moved to Wild Song Ranch and started the Paddock Paradise boarding concept here. I had my horses at a place where they initially had like a 5 acre field of grass, and I've educated myself a lot on equine nutrition since then. Luckily, I don't know how this happened, but neither of my horses got laminitis or founders. So, but they were, yeah, so about 5 acres. And what had happened is within a couple of months, the two horses just completely mowed that down, and weeds and prairie dogs started coming in to the space. And so the owner of that property said, "Ooh, weeds and prairie dogs, we can't do that. That's not good. Let's pull your horses in to this little section, and they can stay in, this paddock for 22 hours a day, and then they can go out with a grazing muzzle for 2 hours." And I was like, "What?" So it got me really thinking about how could they live better? Because at the same time, I was also like, I would pull them out. Um, well, let me back up and say that I don't know that I've ever felt so loved by my horses, but it was false love because they would see me open my door. I happened to live like directly adjacent to their pasture. I would open my door and they would see me and go,
Right.
yeah, and they're like, "Come feed us, please. Give us something." I was like, "Oh, they love me so much." And I went and I gave them enrichment and I gave them food. But then I went to train them and work with them. And it was like herding cats, just mentally. They're trying to get them to focus on what we were doing. And also, their bodies, I was just noticing muscle atrophy and stiffness. And I was felt so guilty about them being, in the small pen for 22 hours. Of course, I gave them hay and everything, but it wasn't what I had envisioned when I thought I wanted my horses to live naturally. I always thought that just, oh, have them in a pasture and grass. And that's what most people think when they think
Hmm.
natural horse boarding. So I happened to be My friend Tia Joan, she is a tremendous natural horsemanship trainer and had kind of followed the Pirelli route. She has her property in Parker, Colorado, and she invited me out to see her place. She's like, "Yeah, you should come look at my track." And I didn't know what she meant. I thought like maybe she had a racetrack. But Tia, I looked at her boarding concept and I was like, "Whoa, this is really neat." I started asking a ton of questions, and of course, she's super proud of it and has seen very, very good results. I think it's probably close to 20 years now that she's been doing it. And so I got the book Paddock Paradise by
Jackson.
Jamie Jack. That's it. So he was a barefoot trimmer in I want to say California for many years, and he was noticing that the Mustangs that came off of the range when they were rounded up had tremendous feet. And then after several, months in captivity, had terrible feet, as you can imagine, right? But the Mustangs, were never trimmed, never brought in
Right.
for trimming. So he started researching like the natural migration patterns and how horses walk over all sorts of different terrains and variability in footings that stimulate the hoof, that grind the hoof, that shape it really nicely, chip it off naturally, and file them. Nature is doing all of the work. So his goal was to try and create a boarding um, setup that mimicked nature as much as he possibly could in a domestic setting. And that's where the Paddock Paradise came about. I brought this concept to the owner of the property I was at with my horses and said, can we do this? Because this is what I'm seeing. I also recognize that the challenge it is for small farm owners or ranch owners in keeping healthy, sustainable pastures, right? Like the
Yeah.
graze down and the infestation by foreign weeds, is really real, and pests. Unfortunately, she wasn't open to it at the time. Meanwhile, my training business was starting to burst at the seams a little bit, so I needed a new home. And that's how I stumbled upon Wild Song Ranch. And with the now owners, who happened to be a client of mine at the time, and we just serendipitously found this property together and said, let's do a thing. And I told her that about this boarding concept, and she's like, that's amazing, but how are we going to differentiate? I mean, clearly everyone's doing this. And I'm like, nobody is doing this.
No. Right.
No, I mean, the most horse facilities are set up for the convenience of humans,
Hmm.
right? We come to the barn, the horse is in a stall right there, right next to the tack room, right next to the wash rack. We can just pull them out, we can groom them and canter around in the arena and then put them back, right? How convenient for us.
Right.
At Wildsound
Yes.
Ranch, they have to walk half a mile to go get their horse, which isn't convenient for them, but
No.
it's great for the horses.
I also think you're exactly right. It's our convenience, but we also tell the lie that it's to keep our horses safer,
Sure. 100%.
right?
100%.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Because if they're by themselves, then they're not going to bite each other or kick each other. They're not going to get their hoof stuck in that prairie dog hole, right? Which, by the
Right.
way, I just need to tell you, like the worry and the statistics about horses and prairie dog holes is way overblown, way overblown.
Oh, yes.
And I'll maybe get onto that soapbox another time.
Well, I
But
would think for any of my people in Virginia, as much fox hunting as they do, they're very aware that horses do not just fall into gopher holes, right?
right.
Like,
Well, and totally. And this is maybe like a really interesting segue into autonomy because
oh,
what
yes.
the science says, because you do have injuries when we're constraining horses and they
Mhm.
trip on something because the horse doesn't have full autonomy of his or her body. They don't have full agency of their limbs when we're constraining them. But what we see, because we turn horses out at full gallops all week long at Wild Song, we have 40 acres on the backside that we call the playground. And we do have some like carved trails that people can trail ride around. But then we also take groups of horses for training for their proprioception and cardio. It's one of the ways that we like to elicit cardio from the horses. We turn them out in groups of three or four, and they gallop all around and up and down. And there are thousands of prairie dog holes out there. But because they have agency over their body and they're not constrained, they can navigate and move around the footing, unstable as it might be, with all of their senses. And what happens when a lot of times we ride in constraint is that we are taking away their sensory mechanisms. Their hooves have so much feeling potential
Hmm.
that they can sense changes in the terrain long before we can even see them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had a student that she read a study that said there's only been one horse that has died from falling in a prairie dog hole in like all of the West, and I don't know what the date ranges are of that.
Right.
So again, if this
Interesting.
was Georgia, she'd know for sure.
Oh,
I'm kind
she
of
would know for sure, right?
science
Right.
adjacent, and I'm like, I will go get that study
Yes.
on my to-do list. But anyways,
Yes.
it makes sense with everything that we know about
Hmm.
intrinsic training.
Yeah. And how do you get people, do the people that come to Wild Song, obviously, if they've done a little research, they already know what
Yeah.
they're in for. But do you get people that are just new to the whole boarding a horse thing and have no idea? And do you have to convince them that this is
Yeah.
better, or how does that work?
Well, I think we are very transparent about what we are and what we are not, just so we can manage expectations. But to your line of thinking, what's very interesting is we've called in a lot of first-time horse owners because there are a lot of people that read this concept and cannot quite square it with their 20 years of traditional mindset.
Hmm.
Then again, so we'll have actually, kind of this polarity where we have beginners who are like, this makes total sense to me, and horses need to be with friends. They need to be moving all the time. They need to be in a species appropriate environment. This is perfect. And so we have kind of naturalistic people that are very horse first, but newer to horses. And Hatha Equus actually brings in a lot of those through our new student program. Then we also have some people who are kind of sages and have been around horses for a long time and seen all the things, but really seen them,
Right.
with eyes that are able to like see into the horse's heart and soul and and realize that something that was existing in their traditional paradigm was not working for the horse. And so we have actually, a couple of very, very seasoned horse owners who have made the switch here and are just all in on this. And luckily, we have a hoof trimmer who is really world renowned. His name is Philip Himanka, and he's part of a hoof care organization that's really advocating for barefoot horses. And so they push the paddock paradigm. He's referred a lot of people to us because he sees a lot of cases of horses that have been um, detrimentally shod or just even having shoes for many, many years has started to create lamenesses. And so they come to him and he's like, first things first, we need to fix this hoof. His recommendation usually is to get the horse onto some sort of dry lot where they have a lot of movement. Paddock Paradise Pref. He's referred quite a few to us as well.
That makes me think. I had a student that I saw earlier today. She's got a horse that she imported from Europe, well trained to a high level of dressage. And she said today, I think he's finally figuring out where his hind feet are. It does happen, and we don't, I think, in the traditional sense, or at least in the competition sport horse world of it, we don't realize how much the lack of autonomy, the lack of movement, the lack of freedom, how much that does affect them. I definitely want to talk about all that. But the other thing I wanted to ask you before we get into all that is you have a pretty cool dressage background, though.
Thanks.
So I just want you to tell me a little bit about that because it's very interesting. And coming from that sort of classical background,
Yeah,
I think you really
yeah.
have a
Well,
good feel for how this all translates.
one thing that I try and fully disclaim for people is that I actually didn't compete a ton. I competed a bit when I was a youth in eventing, but I ended up doing a working student stint with an O judge near Orlando in Florida. She had a facility in New York and then in Florida, so I did a season split there and basically went from zero to Grand Prix in a very, very quick time. I mean, I wasn't zero. I had already done quite a bit of dressage, but just not to the FEI level. So she really brought me into FEI, and she tried really hard to get me to compete, and I just couldn't. I groomed for her. First of all, I don't know how any groom affords to compete. Yeah, but I also, I mean, I was talking to you a little bit about my performance anxiety. It applied to the show world as well.
Interesting, interesting.
So, for all of the listener, I was a theater major, a an actor and director degree split. I decided not to pursue acting because I have a history of choking. And that transferred to the competition world too, as I got so nervous about showing that I ended up not prioritizing the horse. And so what that
Mm,
looked like is me taking stuff out on the horse. I was never abusive, but like mentally, blaming the
yes.
horse. And it got to a very negative cycle where like the priorities were all wrong. Um, and I'd like to think that in my advanced age, if
Girl.
I were to go and try and compete again, it would be different knowing what I know now. But it's a hard environment to be in when you're
Hmm.
grooming for an O judge. Um, and so competing, I avoided that like the plague. I went to tons of shows as a groom, and I trained on several Grand Prix horses, and several horses at many different levels below Grand Prix, but all FEI horses. Then after I left that, I was kind of in the wilderness for a while. I went to uh, Denmark to study with Klaus Hempfling for a 6-week clinic in Denmark. He's German, but he lives in
Yeah.
Denmark. And that was such an interesting um, dichotomy between what I had just come from in this super intense, rigorous, highly competitive dressage world, and then went to uh, Klaus Hempfling, who, would sit in a pen with a horse for 4 hours in order to honor its choice. You know, I'm like, how do I merge the two? I don't, it
Right.
was just
Yeah.
such different worlds and such different language. And there was some truth to both, right? Like,
Sure. Hmm.
um, my dressage mentor was an incredible bodybuilder, right? She knew how to shape a horse's body. Klaus was a spirit builder. And but they were just two systems that could not live together at that time. And so when I was in the wilderness, as I like to call it, that's where I found Karen Rolfe. And I said, "Oh my goodness, she's doing a lot of really cool stuff that I think Klaus wouldn't frown upon." I mean, he frowned upon a lot, but maybe not quite as much. It was hard to make him not frown about the state of the horse world. Karen had studied under this dressage mentor as well. Karen, in just a very pragmatic way, was explaining how she got the results from horses and how she could have like the spiritual and the practical and also create, as she says, happy, yeah, athlete.
Hmm.
Yeah, studied her stuff for some time and ended up doing her mastermind when I decided I wanted to take this thing pro on my own. She helped me tie everything together, but also the horses really were my biggest guide and guinea pigs.
Of course, they are our greatest teachers, right?
Truth.
Yeah. All right, so what is your definition of autonomy as it relates to horses?
Well, it's so funny because, as with most things, when people ask for definitions, I decided to ask the internet. ChatGPT says that autonomy means the ability or right to make your own decisions and govern yourself independently without external control. That aligns with what my initial thought was about this. If I had to boil it down to one word, it would be choice. Right now,
Mhm.
horses cannot have full autonomy and live in a domestic world. It's just impossible. If we allowed for full autonomy, really they'd be dead. We need fences. We need them to stay in some sort of containers. They in the wild, even then, they have autonomy until they reach, the boundary lines of the BLM. Um, so the way I see it is there's really a spectrum for autonomy with horses. And the container that most of the horse world keeps horses in really minimizes autonomy to nearly nothing. I think there's this place where we can give them as much autonomy as possible within the confines, but we still have to have some boundaries around it. So when I say autonomy, it's like it's never truly autonomous. And I would argue that's how it is for humans as well, right? We still have to drive the speed limit and pay our taxes and not go around abusing each other.
Right?
Our society puts the boundaries on this, our society and our government, right? Um, Now, I guess technically, and this could get really down this rabbit hole of philosophical thinking, but like we technically do have choice to break all of those rules, but the consequences for us keep us in line, our understanding of the consequences. The way that we like to utilize autonomy the most is for movement development and new movement acquisition and healthy bodies and minds. And so in Hatha Equus, we decide whether the session is going to be about about cultivating healthy movement, or finding a way to rehabilitate a horse, or if we are going to need to work on like boundaries, husbandry, and all of the really practical stuff that we need to be a balanced horse person. To get really into specifics, I have some non-negotiable behaviors for the horse. I need them to pick up their hoof, and I have ways to resolve any sort of tension and do it in a way where like it's consensual. I know Georgia mentioned that word a couple times in the podcast, but consent also, by the way, we should also use the word assent, which is more like an agreement, because consent means that you have the full understanding of the implications of what you're doing. Um, when I'm picking up a horse's hoof, I really need to get to the place where that horse can relax the hoof and he or she can let us work on the hoof, pick it, trim it, whatever. I need to make sure that the horse can lead. That's a non-negotiable. Everything boils down to those two things. You need to lead and pick up your hoofs. Because then I can
I
get you in the
like
training.
that. Just two straightforward, basic things.
You to relax to pressure. That's actually kind of the big umbrella thing. Yeah.
Yes, I think that yielding to pressure is so important and something that a lot of times is overlooked. And I know I asked Georgia at least a similar question, but how do you know or how do you feel, whatever your sense is, when the horse is participating
Hmm.
with some sort of autonomy, or when are
Yeah.
they just being
I
obedient.
think that's a great way to kind of separate because I need obedience in some capacity. Of course,
Exactly. And at times you need that
yes.
obedience. Georgia talked about her kids not wanting to be a cooked pear. But
Yeah.
you need it with your kids too. Sometimes they
Yeah.
just need to listen. Don't run into
Yeah.
traffic.
I use kids as an analogy a lot. Like if we're
Yeah,
going through the grocery store and you are pulling things off the shelf and pulling the
right.
fire alarm, right? I'm gonna instill a little bit of boundary setting.
Right.
And that's why I say it's like we can't just do autonomy all the time. We need obedience. And I think if we're doing obedience in a co-creational way, it feels good for them as well
Hmm.
because they feel safe, right? Like you can trust me by lifting this hoof that I am not going to eat you. You are going to be able to flee if you need. Because most horses, in the hoof example, they struggle against hoof picking because they need a sense of control because they don't feel safe,
Hmm.
right? So if we can do the work to make the horse feel safe all the way up until that moment, and also like when they try and pull it away, I will gently ask them to, I will hold it there. Um, and then I will ask them to release their tension and give them some control in that sense. If they work on self-control and self-organization and maybe seek relaxation and understand that concept, then they know what to do when they're faced with that pressure. That is probably one of the biggest gifts that I can give a horse. But I would not call that autonomy, right? I would call that husbandry or safety. When we talk about autonomy, that's when the word play comes in. And I know you guys talked so beautifully about play last week that basically when we work with the horses in an autonomous setting, we're giving them a playground to experiment and to say no 100% because where else do they get? I can't allow them to say no in the same way when I'm asking for the hoof, but they can say no to anything that they want when we're doing autonomous play. And
Right.
so, in that context, they really have a sense of agency. And when we can start getting them into their seeking system, and to get them to start being more curious about things and exploring, then they have a greater sense of autonomy, especially when they know they can say no in that realm. To create a visualization for folks, we'll turn the horses out in the arena, for example. It's a little different in groups with horses that don't know each other. We'll need to halter them just to keep them safe. But when they're on the lead, in the autonomy space that we explore, um, horses can take their owner wherever or their person that they're working with. And the same goes if they're totally at liberty. Let's say we have three horses from the same herd that are in the arena at liberty, and we have their owners, and we've got all the things. We've got the pool noodles and the mats and the soccer balls and plastic bags and a lot of times treat pouches, but there are some horses that will play without them, without any food rewards. So we are just taking them to all of these objects and asking them to tell us what they think about them. Some horses are like, I want to kill that ball. Some horses are interested in pawing a mat. Some horses are wanting to chase a noodle. And we come up with all sorts of other objects. It's just anything that kind of can elicit some sort of emotional response from the horse. And we say, that is great. You can have all the emotions that you want to have towards that object in this container. We can't do it to the people, and we'd like for you to not do it to each other.
You were talking about letting the horse take you wherever. That is one of my favorite things to tell people
Mm,
to do.
yeah.
On the lead or even riding,
Yes.
within safety parameters, right?
Yeah.
But let them lead you and see what they do and what is interesting. And yes, you can have boundaries, but we so often are micromanaged. A lot of horse people have the feeling that if we are in control,
Yeah,
we are safe.
right,
It's not true, right? I
right.
mean, my husband and I, he still works in public safety. I did for almost 20 years. Anything can happen anytime.
Mm,
It, there's no controlling anything. So
right.
get over it. But we feel like if we can control where our horse is, what they do, what we let them see, what we don't let them see, that they are going to be safe, and then therefore we're going to be safe. I have found that the more autonomy a horse has, and also in the sense that they realize or they know that you, the human, are in this with them.
Yeah,
If you're both making autonomous decisions, they're much more likely to save your butt when you run into a gopher hole. If you're holding them all the time and they don't
right.
know where their feet are, they're going to fall into the hole.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons that I think bridleless is really helpful.
Hmm.
Although they don't need to take off the bridle in order to
Right.
experience the benefits of bridleless, right? They can
Hmm.
always have a loose rein. Um, I've actually shifted a little bit from having everyone do this early on to the more intermediate and advanced people. I still want, kiddos to have reins that are not tight, but a little bit more contained. That being said, that's when they're riding by themselves. But when we are doing the development through consensual riding, as Georgia and I call it, we even have a class that's called this, and hopefully in the near
So neat.
future, a course, an online course. But we will ask them to just hang on to the saddles while we take the horse in and have the horse do some autonomous movement. Because when they can trust that their bodies can adapt
Hmm.
to unpredictable movement, to be off balance and regain balance, we are doing the same thing for the human that we are trying to get for the horse. A lot of what George and I do is trying to get horses off balance so that they can regain balance. That's tremendous for developing nervous system health. But what it does mentally is it helps kiddos and adults, adult beginners, stop feeling like they have to control so much. Like
I think it
riding
would help
without
any adult, Elizabeth.
totally.
It's not just the adult beginners.
There you go.
It's
I should,
not.
I know I
Don't
should say, but
you can
no,
say it.
you're right, you're right.
You can say it because I've known ladies who ride for 20 years and are the biggest
And
control freaks.
maybe they're the ones that are holding on the hardest, right?
They are. They are.
Yeah,
It is so
yeah,
true.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's fantastic
Hands-free riding is one of my favorite exercises for folks to actually
too.
learn to trust their horse because
Yes, and themselves,
really
their own
the
body.
safest thing is a horse that's relaxed and a human that's relaxed.
Yes.
Right? Because even when I've taken spills, like I'm going through the air like, oh, I think I got this. I think that my nervous system is just learn how to be relaxed even when something totally unpredictable happens. Knock on wood. Yeah, I'm going to keep working out so I don't break more bones in the future. But it's also been a very long time, knock on wood again, since I've fallen. It's been several years. I think it's because of this, the work that I do with um, bridleless stuff and getting the horse to move autonomously underneath me.
Yeah.
I actually think one of my favorite games that the Pirellis passed on is the passenger game.
Yes.
This is a game where actually horses who have never had an opportunity to voice anything before, it can like blow their minds.
Yes.
So for those who don't know it, um the passenger game is where your horse can go anywhere that they want to, anywhere. This means even like a tiny circle by the gate, like 100
Hmm.
times. And you are not allowed to touch the reins to move them away. Of course, it's really safe to do this in an arena with no other horses or
Right.
people. But you do get to control one variable, and that is speed. So you can say, horse, we're just going to be walking, or horse, we're going to be trotting. I've even done this at canter. But I love this as a warm-up exercise for my horses. I just get to come out and they get to choose. Maybe they want to go like circle down by their friends on the other side of the arena. Maybe they want to explore. And I get to see how like their patterns shift each day. If they do, I get to feel how their body is truly feeling without influence from me. It does wonders
It
to
does.
help
I do
horses'
it
mind.
probably every time I get on a horse. Like
Yeah, yeah,
that's probably the first thing that I do. That's my, warm up too. It's like I want to see what they're telling me today before I start doing
right,
anything. Yeah,
right.
love
Starting
that
thing.
exercise.
The exercise that we probably do the most is like the assisted play.
Hmm.
With the pass, so we call it the sack of potatoes exercise. And so the rider just is on and just holds on to the saddle, or in some cases, they say, okay, no hands. And then you have
Hmm.
ground support guiding the horse to chase something passionately. Because even with the passenger game, the one thing that I do find is the horses often are, at least at first, I think those who have done it a lot really understand it. And they're like, oh, it's
Hmm.
just my joyride time. Right.
Right.
But those who are like, what are we doing? Are a little confused. They don't really have a
Right.
purpose. They're like, one thing just going around. And that's part of the experiment as well.
Mhm. Right.
But with the autonomous work that Georgia and I do, we really want them to have a purpose for movement. So, be it chasing something, moving their front legs in a fancy way. We call it the panther walk, but it looks like the Spanish walk. Something where they feel like they have a purpose other than Elizabeth said, just go. But that's where we cultivate play, because if we can partner play with that sense of autonomy, then we're really onto something. We're really making changes in the horse's body and mind.
I think that's so important, and I think it's just as important to do that with the humans because what
Mhm.
most humans don't realize is how much they rely on their hands.
Yes. Yeah.
Even when we talk about you gotta have good hands and this, that, and the other thing, it is human instinct to grab.
Yeah.
So anytime you are
We're monkeys.
feeling, yes, right? That's what the babies do right off the
Oh,
bat,
yeah.
right? That anytime you're feeling insecure, you're gonna grab. That is just the way it is. And so, one, you have to train your nervous system not to panic. The sack of potatoes thing is a great way to do that. And then you also have to train your hands not to grab. That's why I like doing bridleless or just keep your reins on there, but tie them up and don't use them. Because
Right.
people, even with a long, long rein, you can still be so micromanagey and you don't
Right.
realize it until you've taken them away.
Yeah.
Then when you feel confident in your body and how your body's going to respond and how your horse's body is going to respond, then it just adds a whole nother level to your ability and your confidence on the horse and your own sense of autonomy.
Yeah. It's one of the, I think, bummers about the way that the horse world is currently is that those kids, and I'll just use that term generally because all kids up to 90 that have really, really good seats have likely fallen a lot
Hmm.
from my experience. I would love to tell people like you'll never fall. And my goal is to set it up so that they never fall. But at the flip side, I also recognize like how much falling helped me. I vaulted for a handful of years when I was younger. So I practiced falling a lot. But the falling component, like the unpredictability, the that is what teaches the best for our seats and our nervous systems. Yeah, the consensual riding where they're a sack of potatoes, that's the closest that I can come. It's still an early experiment, I guess. Georgia and I have only been doing this for about 5 years, so we'll see how everyone's seats are in the years to come and if it matches those kiddos who have fallen a lot. A lot that can actually be done from simulation too, though. I researched a couple years ago what it would cost to get one of those horses that like trotted or cantered
Oh, yes.
automatically. We just feel so bad for these horses
Yes.
that we're having to shoulder the burden of people's learning. That's only $80,000.
It's only $80,000. It's just
Like,
a drop in the bucket, Elizabeth.
hey,
Why haven't you done one
yeah,
yet?
no, it'll pay itself off. I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna put a barrel on a mat, like a gymnastics mat, and put the
Mhm.
saddle on that, and have the people sit on that because I need something to just show turning and where to find center. I had one student who came up to me. She had some horse experience, and she said, I actually sat on one of those things. And I'm telling you, this barrel, this like $50 barrel that you have, it did so much more for me than that horse did. Of course, you didn't get the canter, but like because it's actually incredibly unstable,
Right.
it works. There are parts of their body that they're not used to activating. And it may not
Hmm.
be the exact muscles that we use when we're riding, but it's certainly adjacent to those. So
Right.
we're waking up the body. So many people, we're sitting in chairs right now, and we're horse people. We don't
Right.
have to sit here for 8 hours. So most people who come from desk jobs or, kids who don't move as much as we did maybe, 1,000 years ago, they really benefit from just random movements. We call it movement novelty
I
and
like that. Yeah.
variability. Yeah,
Well,
I was just gonna say real quick, the tradition of the schoolmaster was kind of
hmm
like the historical way to bring up new students so that they were riding horses that already knew it in their bodies. But we
right.
don't have that tradition here. Riggins is my one schoolmaster. He's like fourth level.
I always tell people is that the horse might be trained to do certain things, but you're still going to have to learn how to ask for those things and how to ride those things. And you're
Right.
never going to do it like the person who trained the horse. So it's always going to be a learning experience. Now, if you are a more advanced person who has ridden a lot of horses in your life, another professional, yes, they might get on somebody that's a schoolmaster and be able to make things work quicker. But for your normal amateur rider, it's still going to be a learning process.
Totally.
So always a
Totally.
learning process.
Yeah.
So if there are people who are on their own riding, how do you think they can start thinking about teaching themselves some autonomy and allowing their horses some autonomy without getting their nervous systems in overdrive and panicking about
Mhm.
the whole thing?
Yeah, I think starting slow. Like, I think a lot of people, you find this more in beginners. And I will say this is true in beginners. A lot of beginners want to go faster than they
Mhm.
really ought to be. Kids
Right.
and adults. I see this excitement and they feel like they need to trot and they need to canter. And while I think there's some value in having people experience a controlled canter early on, um, I think the adults who then experience something a little bit more fast paced or a little bit more out of control tend to like bounce back really quickly and say, wait, I'd rather just go really, really, really slow. And I'm like, oh, thank you
Mm.
for coming back to this. I'm always feeling people pushing a little bit more than they really should
And
be.
they,
Kids
yeah,
for sure. But the same thing happens for kids where like something scary happens and they're like, oh, I actually don't want to go that far or that fast.
right.
So I think for the people who are on their own, like the same should apply. Go slow. What happens if you just let go of the reins or hold the reins at the buckle? Just at a stop. If you get on and your horse can't stop, that's a different problem. That's a bigger problem. That's where a professional should come in. But what's really cool is pretty quickly the horses can learn how to self-regulate out of that. I'm going on a little tangent, but hopefully I'll bring it back full circle. A lot of horses that I experience who have never had this kind of autonomy, like where you get on and oh my gosh, there's loose rein, I'm going. Um, I just play with gentle circles. And the second that I start to feel the slow down, I drop the reins again. So gentle circle, if they start speeding up, drop the reins. If you're going along a fence line and they start to speed up, I guide their nose to the fence line. And then once their body slows themselves down, I drop the reins. So this is not a purely autonomous solution to the autonomy problem. It is very much in like a safety and boundaries conversation over on this end of the spectrum. So very quickly, what you see is that horses start to recognize, oh, there's a much nicer feeling when I can control myself, when I'm in this slower space. That's typically the problem that I see when there's incongruence between the horse and the human. Initially, and they're like, I can't let go of the reins because the horse will bolt, right? Like, yeah, because they've never experienced that kind of
Hmm.
freedom in that space. They don't really know what to do when they're not controlled or being puppeteered. If that's happening for someone on their own, seek help. No. But go slow. Start on the ground, even. Can you walk with your horse on the ground and not have them run away? Like take the tack completely off. Do they choose to be by you? If they don't, that's where pulling in play, like Georgia talked about on the last
Hmm.
podcast, that's where that can come in. You can start to build that, those positive associations and that conditioned emotional response to you, the human. It's unpacking that all the way for um, our hypothetical person on their own. There's
Yeah.
so many different
I
ways that we
think
could go
it's
with it.
I love that exercise that you were talking about. That is teaching the horse a bit of self-awareness too.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
Yeah,
if you
100%.
slow down, when you get here, it feels better. People need this
Yeah.
self-awareness too. And a lot of times they have been micromanaged and sort of
Yes.
puppeteered in their own
Especially
riding
in
lessons.
dressage. Especially in dressage.
God, yes, right? I will start teaching somebody and I'll ask them questions and they just blank stare at you. They have no idea. Nobody's ever asked them a question before. I think it takes a fair amount of self-awareness for us humans to get to that point. And we talked about this with Georgia, so I'd love to hear your opinion on it because she talked about how she felt when her horse just turned her butt to her.
Yeah.
And you talked about, does your horse want to be with you? And if the answer is no, then where do you go from there? And of course, there's all kinds of exercises we can bring into play and all of that. But how do you t talk to people about not feeling terrible about that? Not beating yourself
Not
up
taking it so personally.
emotionally or not dwelling in it. Other people are going to get mad. Georgia talked a little bit about how the ranges she went through. How
Mhm.
do you think people can think about that in a way where they don't feel so defeated, maybe, and that there is hope
Yeah.
for them and their horrors?
I think what we lean on to help give people perspective is our science is really helpful. What is the experience that this creature is having because of the biochemistry? I think it helps to know what is going on from a scientific perspective. Okay, this horse is actually experiencing a high cortisol spike because they're in fight or flight. So it's not you, it's the fact that they are um, in survival mode. And painting that picture for someone, the ears back thing comes up a lot, especially when we're doing play. Was this horse like aggressing towards me? No, that is this posture that the horse adopts when it's chasing something. It is the most natural thing for it to put its ears back in and go after this because it's got a purpose
Mhm.
behind chasing this object that in no way is a reflection of how he or she feels about you. But sometimes it is, right?
Right.
I don't see it so much. When we start doing this work, there's actually very, very little horses getting after people aggressively because they're now suddenly in a place where they're like, oh my gosh, this person is fun. So, from an emotional standpoint, it's maybe a question more of like backing up. I think it's always important to see people, to see them and hear them and make sure like they know, yeah, what you're experiencing is totally valid. I've been there, but it's not about me. It's about about you right now, and your feelings matter, right? Um, that being said, when they have a sense of control over something, it can help them process to heal that. We can look at does this horse have needs that aren't met? Do we have social needs? Do we have physical needs? Most everyone that we encounter, they can start feeling better about the scenario by identifying the problem, the science, and the alternatives. Um, yeah, it's interesting, Anna, because I don't think we actually run into that a ton anymore. Every once in a while, a horse would rather be with his or her friends than with you because whatever, the grass is great that day or the hay is
Right.
great. But I think uh, from our experience, like we, when you start introducing all of these autonomous things into their life, they choose to be with you a lot. So I don't know if that's like a cop-out answer, but
No, I
but
think that's a perfect answer. I love that. It's so hard for people oftentimes, especially in the traditional world, to find the alternatives.
especially if you're at a barn where like you're the village weirdo, right? If you're
Yes,
saying anything different.
right. And that often happens when you're in a boarding barn. You're like the village weirdo. A lot of times for trainers to have a really good, thriving business where they are having people in a lesson program and training and all of this, it's a very tight knit thing and a tightly
Yeah,
held thing,
yeah,
right? And so when there's a problem, there are not alternatives that are offered often.
right.
And if you just go out and you Google, you're going to find all kinds of things. And then you might bring something to your trainer and they're like, oh my God, that's that, you know, consensual horsemanship thing. That's craziness.
Uh-huh.
Or that natural horsemanship thing. That is craziness. So I think it's important for people to realize that there are alternatives. They're
Yeah.
not all off the rails, right? Or, right or left, right? We don't all have to be, not to get into political mess, but Democrats or Republicans. We can be in the middle and use the science and come up with solutions. Honor the horse, honor the human.
It's huge. Georgia and I talked about this a lot, multiple times throughout the years. I was really, really worried that a fundamentalist anywhere is not always a good thing. I think they need to exist in order to like pursue a concept to its
Mhm.
furthest. But when it came to the intrinsic motivation, I feel like if we were to go down the pathway where this was the only thing that we did and we just gave horses autonomy all the time, it would be a scary place. So we kind of ended up finding this place in the middle where we can meet every horse owner uh, or trainer where they're at and offer this stuff as another tool in their toolkit. In my opinion, it's the most important tool because again,
Right,
I think circling back, like it relates back to safety and it relates
right.
back to horse overall welfare. But it is just one tool of many, many, many tools that we utilize in order to help horses and owners have the kind of relationship that they want to have, their version of happiness, whatever that is.
Yeah. I believe it was my first clinic that I ever did with Karen Rolfe. It was a group of ladies who were very um, Pirelli diehard people. One of them asked Karen why she wasn't a licensed Pirelli instructor, and she, in her very wonderful, polite way, said, "It it's a tool in my toolbox. My toolbox just gets bigger and bigger, and I have more things that I can use." I would say all of the best Pirelli licensed instructors that I know were are hugely diverse in their horsemanship.
It feels safe to follow one thing, right? I know Georgia talked about this last week, but to get people to think for themselves again, right? Like to
Yeah.
start questioning the guru
Hmm.
and start asking, well, is there a different way that would work for me and for my horse better, right? It is also there's safety in the village. It's scary to break out of the village, but we are only as capable as our set of tools. The best trainers do have a vast toolkit and are willing to experiment and try. Yeah, that's why I couldn't stick with just dressage and I couldn't stick with just Klaus Hempfling. I couldn't even stick with Karen Rolfe. I thought I was going to be her apprentice. I actually had signed on to be an apprentice with her. Then I did a stupid thing and I decided to date this boy. And I was like, I can't move down to Florida and be with Karen. I'm dating this. Anyways, he didn't last. For many, many years, I regretted that I could have been her apprentice. And learned her system,
Hmm.
but there was something. It wasn't just the boy. It was like there was something deep
Hmm.
in me that was like, no, I kind of want to be my own thing, my own
That
thing.
that's
I don't think I probably wouldn't have um gotten my first horse and experimented with him. I've met this person that made an influence and gave me a little seed and a nugget, and that horse that taught me that, and that person, and then and like probably wouldn't have met Georgia, probably
right.
wouldn't have gotten into it. So this is, perfect where we are.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for being on today. It was wonderful to talk to you and
Thank
hear
you. You
all of your
too.
thoughts on play and
I
autonomy.
love seeing you, Anna, and it's so nice we got to have this deep conversation. I appreciate you.
It is, and I look forward to more.
Likewise. Be
Thank
well.
you.
Namaste.
All right, horse fiends, thanks for hanging out with us today. If this episode got your gears turning, don't forget to check out Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart. The links are in the show notes. It's the program that'll take everything we talked about here and actually help you apply it in real life with your horse. And hey, before you ride off, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a quick rating or review of the show. It helps more riders like you find us and keep these conversations going. All the links you need are waiting in the show notes. Happy riding!